And you guys know what week it is. Welcome back to Amazing Sharks. And it's Shark Week. Shark Week, Shark Week, Shark Week. Shark Week, Shark Week, Shark Week. We all love Shark Week here. Shark Week is the best week in the world to learn about sharks. And so we are doing the Porbeagle shark. I hope you guys really enjoy it. And I hope you guys will subscribe, like, and comment. If there's anything you want to see, let me know, and I'll be happy to make you a video, and I'll even give you a shout out. So enjoy. All right, you guys, this week we are learning about the Porbeagle shark. If you hear talking in the background, my nephew Aaron, who has been featured in one of my other videos, is playing Call of Duty with my fiance. So, the Porbeagle shark is a species of mackerel shark distributed widely in the cold and temperate marine waters of the North Atlantic and Southern Hemisphere. In the North Pacific, its ecological equivalent is the closely related salmon shark. It typically reaches 8.2 feet in length and a weight of 298 pounds. North Atlantic sharks grow larger than Southern Hemisphere sharks and differ in coloration and aspects of life history. Gray above and white below, the Porbeagle shark has a very stout midsection that tapers towards the long pointed snout and the narrow base of the tail. It has large pectoral and first dorsal fins, tiny pelvic, second dorsal and anal fins, and a crescent-shaped caudal fin. The most distinctive features of this species are its three cusped teeth, its white blotch on the aft base of its first dorsal fin, and the two pairs of lateral keels on its tail. Alright, the Porbeagle shark has an opportunistic hunter that preys mainly on bony fishes and cephalopods throughout the water column, including the bottom, most commonly found over food-rich banks on the outer continental shelf. It makes occasional forays both close to shore and into the open ocean to a depth of 4,460 feet. It also conducts long-distance seasonal migrations, generally shifting between shallower and deeper water. The Porbeagle is fast and highly active, with physiological adaptations that enable it to maintain a higher body temperature than the surrounding water. It can be solitary or gregarious, and has been known to perform seemingly playful behavior. The shark is aplacental viviparous, with oophagy developing embryos being retained within the mother's uterus and subsisting on non-viable eggs. Females typically bear 4 pups every year. Only a few shark attacks of uncertain provenance have been attributed to the Porbeagle. It is well regarded as a game fish by recreational anglers. The meat and fins of the Porbeagle are highly valued, which has led to a long history of intense human exploitation. However, this species cannot sustain heavy fishing pressure due to its low productive capacity. Direct commercial fishing for the Porbeagle, principally by Norwegian longliners, led to stock collapses in the eastern North Atlantic in the 1950s and the western North Atlantic in the 1960s. The Porbeagle continues to be caught throughout its range, both intentionally and as bycatch, with varying degrees of monitoring and management. The International Union for Conservation of Nature has assessed the Porbeagle as vulnerable worldwide and as either endangered or critically endangered in different parts of its northern range. The Porbeagle has an almost global amphi-temperature distribution. Absent from the tropics in northern Pacific, its niche is assumed by the salmon shark. It is found mostly within 30 to 70 degrees north and 30 to 50 degrees south latitudes. In the North Atlantic, the northern limit of its range extends from Newfoundland, Grand Banks off Canada through southern Greenland to Scandinavia and Russia. The southern limit of its range extends from New Jersey and Bermuda through the Azores and Madeira and to Morocco. It is found in the Mediterranean Sea, but not in the Black Sea. Normally, North Atlantic sharks only stray as far as South Carolina and the Gulf of Guinea, but pregnant females from the western North Atlantic population are known to range in the Sargasso Sea almost as far as Hispaniola to give birth. In the southern hemisphere, the Porbeagle apparently occupies a continuous band bound in the south by the Antarctic convergence and extending as far north as Chile and Brazil, the Western Cape Province of South Africa, Australia to southern Western Australia, and southern Queensland and New Zealand. In New Zealand, it is most common found off the south of Cook Strait. The Porbeagle is thought to have colonized the southern hemisphere during the Quaternarian glaciation beginning around 2.6 Maya, when the tropical climate zone was much narrower than it is today. Offshore fishing banks are a favored habitat of the porbeagle, though it can be found at a depth of 4,460 feet in the oceanic basins to littoral, or close to shore waters less than 3.3 feet deep over the entire water column. A single anomalous record was made of a juvenile in brackish water in Mar Chiquita in Argentina. A tracking study off the British Isles has found substantial variation in the short-term movements of this species both between and within individuals. Vertical movements tended to increase with water depth and corresponding temperature stratification. In shallow, unstratified waters, sharks either show no pattern in changing depth or made reverse dial movements, spending the day in shallow water and descending at night. In deeper stratified waters, the shark performed a regular dial migration, spending the day between the thermocline and rising towards the surface at night. The porbeagle has been reported across the temperature range of 34 to 73 degrees Fahrenheit, with most records between 46 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit. In a study that included 420 porbeagles caught off the northwest Atlantic off Canada, all were in water below 55 degrees Fahrenheit and the majority between 41 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, porbeagle populations in the northern and southern hemispheres appear to be completely separate. Two stocks are in the North Atlantic east and west that seldom mix. Only one individual is known to have crossed the Atlantic, covering 2,650 miles from Ireland to Canada. Several discrete stocks are likely present in the southern hemisphere as well. This species segregates by size and sex in the North Atlantic and at least by size in the Southern Pacific. For example, males outnumber females 2 to 1 off Spain, females are 30% more numerous than males off Scotland, and immature males are predominant in the Bristol Channel. Older large sharks may frequent higher latitudes than younger individuals. Seasonal migrations have been observed in porbeagles from both hemispheres. In the western North Atlantic, much of the population spends the spring in deep waters of Nova Scotia continental shelf and migrates north a distance of 310 to 620 miles to spend late summer and fall in the shallow waters of Newfoundland, Grand Banks, and the Gulf of St. Lawrence. In December, large mature females migrate south over 1,200 miles into the Sargasso Sea for pupping, keeping ever deeper 2,000 feet during the day and 600 feet at night so as to stay in the cooler waters beneath the Gulf Stream. In the eastern North Atlantic, porbeagles are believed to spend spring and summer in the shallow continental shelf waters and disperse northwards to overwinter in deeper waters offshore. Migrating sharks may travel 1,400 miles though once they reach their destination, they tend to remain within a relatively localized area. In the South Pacific, the population shifts north past 30 degrees south latitude into subtropical waters in winter and spring, and retreats south past 35 degrees south latitude in summer, when sharks are frequently sighted off sub-Antarctic islands. The porbeagle is a very stout-bodied shark with a fusiform or spindle-like shape. The long conical snout tapers into a sharp point and is supported by enlarged, highly calcified rostral cartilages. The eyes are large and black with snout-nictitating membranes or protective third eyelids. The small S-shaped nostrils are positioned in front of and below the level of the eyes. The mouth is large and strongly curved with moderately protrusible jaws. North Atlantic sharks have 28 to 29 upper tooth rolls and 26 to 27 lower tooth rolls, while southern hemisphere sharks have 30 to 31 upper tooth rolls and 27 to 29 lower tooth rolls. Each tooth has a strongly arched base and a nearly straight, awl-like central cusp, which is flanked by a pair of smaller cusplets in all but the smallest individuals. The 5 pairs of gill slits are long and precede the pectoral fin bases. The pectoral fins are long and narrow. The first dorsal fin is high and large, with a rounded apex and originating just behind the pectoral fin bases. The pelvic fins are much smaller than the first dorsal fin. The second dorsal fin and anal fins are smaller still and placed about even with each other on a narrow basis that allow pivoting from side to side. The sides of the caudal peduncle are expanded into prominent lateral keels. A second shorter pair of keels are present below the main keels. The caudal fin is large and crescent-shaped with the lower lobe almost as long as the upper. Both dorsal and ventral depressions or precaudal pits are at the caudal fin base, and a deep ventral notch is near the tip of the upper caudal fin lobe. The skin is soft and covered by tiny flattened dermal denticles or scales, lending a velvety texture. Each denticle has 3 horizontal ridges that lead to teeth on the posterior margin. The dorsal coloration is a medium to dark gray or slate, extended to bases of the pectoral fins. The underside is white. Adults in the southern hemisphere often have dark coloring under the head and dusky blotches scattered over the belly. The free rear tip of the first dorsal fin is abruptly light gray or white, a feature unique to its species. The Porbeagle may attain a length of 12 foot, though this is uncertain and may have resulted from confusion with other mackerel shark species. A more typical length is 8.2 feet. Female sharks grow larger than males in the North Atlantic with maximum confirmed fork length, snout tip to caudal fin fork, of 8.2 feet for males and 9.8 feet for females. Southern Hemisphere sharks are smaller and the two sexes are similar in size, with females and males attaining fork lengths of 6.6 and 6.9 feet respectively. Most porbeagles weigh no more than 289 pounds, with the record being a 510-pound individual caught off Caithness, Scotland in 1993. Fast and energetic, the porbeagle can be found singly or in groups. Its fusiform body, narrow caudal peduncle with lateral quills, and crescent-shaped tails are adaptations for efficiently sustaining speed, which have also been independently evolved by tunas, billfishes, and several other groups of active fishes. The salmon shark and it are the thickest-bodied members of their family, length-depth ratio approaching 4.5, and consequently have the stiffest swimming style. They oscillate their tails while holding their bodies mostly rigid, which confers propulsive power with high energy efficiency but at the cost of maneuverability. The large gill surface area of the porbeagle allows more oxygen to be delivered to its tissues. It also has a short band of aerobatic red muscle along each side, which can contract independently of the regular white muscle at a lower energy cost, enhancing the shark's stamina. Porbeagles are among the few fishes that exhibit apparent play behavior. Reports principally off the Cornish coast have the species rolling and repeatedly wrapping themselves in long kelp fronds near the surface. This activity may have an exploratory or self-stimulatory purpose, while alternatively, the sharks may be attempting to feed on small kelp organisms or scrape off parasites. In addition, porbeagles within a group have been seen chasing each other, and they will reportedly play with anything floating on the water. Individuals have been observed prodding, tossing, or biting natural and artificial objects, including pieces of driftwood and balloon floats used by anglers. Great white sharks and killer whales are plausible, albeit undocumented predators of the porbeagle. In one record, a small individual caught off Argentina bore bite marks from a copper shark or similar species, but whether the porbeagle was the target of attempted predation or if the two were simply involved in interspecific aggression is uncertain. Known parasites of this species include tapeworms and copiopods. Natural annual mortality is low, estimated to be 10% for juveniles, 15% for adult males, and 20% for adult females in the western North Atlantic. The porbeagle is an active predator that predominantly ingests small to medium-sized bony fishes. It chases down pelagic fishes such as lancetfish, mackerel, pilchards, herring, and sauries, and forages near the bottom for ground fishes such as cusk, haddock, redfish, sebaceous litianas, Trithodidae and Bursidae, cod, hake, icefish, stories, sand lanches, lumpsuckers, and flatfish. Cephalopods, particularly squid, also form an important component of its diet, while smaller sharks such as spiny dogfish and topay sharks are rarely taken. Examinations of porbeagle's stomach contents have also been found small shelled mollusks, crustaceans, and ichthyoderms and other invertebrates, which were likely ingested incidentally, as well as inedible debris such as small stones, feathers, and garbage fragments. In the western North Atlantic, porbeagles feed mainly on pelagic fishes and squid in spring and on ground fishes in the fall. This pattern corresponds to the spring-fall migration of these sharks from deeper to shallower waters and the most available prey types in those respective habitats. Therefore, the porbeagle seems to be an opportunistic predator without strong diet specifically. During spring and summer in the Celtic Sea and on the outer Nova Scotian shelf, porbeagles congregate at tidally introduced thermal fronts to feed on fish that have been drawn by high concentrations of zooplankton. Hunting porbeagles regularly dive from the surface all the way to the bottom, cycling back every few hours. This vertical movement may aid in the detection of olfactory cues. A 1-year-old porbeagle, 3.3 foot long, was reported to have fed on krill and palcholite worms. The timing of the porbeagle's reproductive cycle is unusual in that it is largely similar in both hemispheres rather than being offset by 6 months. This suggests that its reproduction is not significantly affected by temperature or day length, perhaps owing to its endothermic psychology. Physiology. Mating takes place mainly between September and November, though females with fresh mating scars have been reported as late as January off the Shetland Islands. The male bites at the female's pectoral fins, gill region, and flanks while courting and to hold on for copulation. Two mating grounds are known for western North Atlantic porbeagles, one off Newfoundland and the other off Georges Bank in the Gulf of Maine. Adult females have a single functional ovary on the right and two functional uteri. They probably reproduce every year. The litter size is typically 4 with 2 embryos oriented in the opposing directions, sharing each uterus on rare occasions. A litter may contain as few as 1 or as many as 5 pups. The gestation period is 8 to 9 months. Like other members of its family, the porbeagle is aplacental viviparous with oophagy. The main source of embryonic nutrition are unfertilized eggs. During the first half of its pregnancy, the mother ovulates enormous numbers of tiny ova packed into capsules, 3.3 inches long, into her uteri. A newly conceived embryo is sustained by a yolk sac and emerges from its egg capsule at 1.3 to 1.7 inches long. At this time, the embryo has well-developed external gills and a spiral valve intestine. When the embryo is 1.7 to 3.6 inches long, it has reabsorbed its external gills and most of its yolk sac, but cannot yet feed, as it lacks the means to open egg capsules. At a length of 3.9 to 4.7 inches, the embryo grows two massive recurved fangs in the lower jaw for tearing open capsules, as well as two much smaller teeth in the upper jaw. It begins to feed voraciously on yolk, acquiring an enormously distended stomach to accommodate this. The muscles on the belly split down the middle, and the skin on the abdomen stretches greatly. At 7.9 to 8.3 inches long, the embryo appears pink because it lacks pigment except in its eyes, and its head and gill regions are laterally enlarged and gelatinous. The yolk stomach can comprise of 81% of the embryo's total weight, 12 to 17 inches long. The embryo gains pigment and sheds its fangs at a length of 13 to 15 inches. Around this time, the mother stops producing ova. From then on, the embryo relies mainly on the yolk stored in its stomach, though it may continue to feed on remaining eggs by squishing the capsules between its jaws or swallowing them whole. It begins to transfer its energy source from its stomach to its liver, causing the former to shrink and the latter to grow exponentially. The embryo is essentially fully pigmented by a length of 16 inches and has assumed its newborn appearance by a length of 23 inches. By then, its stomach has shrunk enough for its abdominal muscles to close, leaving what has been termed an umbilical scar or yolk sac scar. Neither is accurate. Several series of single cusp teeth grow in both jaws, though they lie flat and remain non-functional until birth. Newborn porbeagles measure 23 to 26 inches long and do not exceed 11 pounds. Up to a tenth of the weight is made up from the liver, though some yolk also remains in its stomach and continues to sustain the pup until it learns to feed. The overall embryonic growth rate is 2.8 to 3.1 inches per month. Sometimes one pup in a uterus is much smaller than the other, but otherwise normal. These runts may result from a dominant forward-facing embryo eating most of the eggs as they arrive, and the mother being unable to provide an adequate egg supply for all her offspring. Birthing occurs from April to September, peaking in April and May for North Atlantic sharks and June and July for Southern Hemisphere sharks. In the Western and North Atlantic, birth occurs well offshore in the Sargasso Sea at depths of around 1,600 feet. Both sexes grow at similar rates until the onset of maturation, when the female is maturing later and at a larger size than the males. In the first 4 years of life, the annual growth rate is 6.3 to 7.9 inches and similar in both hemispheres. Therefore, sharks from the western South Pacific begin to grow slower than those from the North Atlantic. In the North Atlantic, males mature at a forked length of 5.2 to 5.9 feet and at an age of 6 to 11 years, and females at a fork length of 6.6 to 7.2 feet and at an age of 12 to 18 years. In the Southwest Pacific, males mature at a fork length of 4.6 to 4.9 feet and an age of 8 to 11 years, and females at a fork length of 5.6 to 5.9 feet and an age of 15 to 18 years. The oldest porbeagle on record was 26 years of age and measured 8.2 feet long. The maximum lifespan of the species appears to be 30 to 40 years in the Atlantic, but could be as much as 65 years in the South Pacific. Like other members of its family, the porbeagle is endothermic. Metabolic heat generated by its red muscles is conserved within the body by specialized systems of blood vessels. They act as highly efficient counter-current heat exchangers. The porbeagle has several systems: the orbital retia accessing its brain and eyes, the lateral cutaneous retia accessing its swimming muscles, the suburetic rete accessing its viscera, and the kidney retes. Among sharks, the porbeagle's capacity for elevating body temperature is second only to the salmon sharks. Its red muscles are located deep within the body, adjacent to the spine, and its lateral reach is composed of over 4,000 small arteries arranged in bands. It has one of the highest core temperatures within its family at 14 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer than that of the surrounding water. Being warm-blooded may allow the shark to maintain higher cruising speeds, hunt in deep water for extended periods of time, and/or enter higher latitudes during winter to exploit food resources not available to other sharks. The orbital retia of the porbeagle can raise the temperature of its brain and eyes 5.4 to 10.8 degrees Fahrenheit and is likely to serve as a buffer to those sensitive organs against the large temperature shifts that accompany changes in depth. Potential benefits of this include increased visual acuity and reduced response times. The porbeagle has very rarely, if ever, bitten swimmers or boats. As of 2009, the International Shark Attack File attributes 3 bites to the species, 1 provoked and non-fatal, and 2 on boats. One older anecdote tells of a fisherman who provoked a porbeagle into leaping from the water and tearing his clothes. In another account of a swimmer bitten by a mackerel shark, the species responsible could easily have been a misidentified short-fin mako or great white shark. Recently in the North Sea, adult porbeagles have been filmed charging at divers working on oil platforms, sometimes even brushing lightly against them without doing harm. These rushes do not appear to have a predatory intent and may instead be motivated by curiosity or defense. On May 14, 2018, a porbeagle shark was reported to have bitten a fisherman off the coast of Cornwall, United Kingdom, as it was being returned to the sea. At one time, porbeagles were regarded as nuisances by some commercial fishers because they damaged lighter fishing gear intended for smaller species and took cooked fish from lines. The shark is highly valued as a game fish by sport fishers in Ireland, the United Kingdom, and the United States. It fights strongly on hook and line, but does not usually jump into the air like the related short-fin mako shark. Novice anglers often mistake this shark for the mako, which has earned it the affectionate moniker Fako in New England. The International Game Fish Association keeps records on the porbeagle. Prized for its meat and fins, the porbeagle has long been under heavy fishing pressure. The meat is sold fresh, frozen, or dried and salted, and ranks among the most valuable of any shark. In 1997 and 1998, it had a wholesale price of €5 to €7, 4 times that of the blue shark. Most of the demand comes from Europe, though the United States and Japan also import this species. The fins are shipped from East Asia to use in shark fin soup. The remainder of the shark may be used for production of leather, liver, oil, and fish meal. International trade in the porbeagle appears to have been significant but remains unquantified, as shark products tend not to be reported to species level and may consist of a mix of various species. The shark is caught most readily on long lines, but is also susceptible to gill nets, drift nets, trawls, and hand lines. It is valuable enough to be generally retained, but when caught as bycatch, the storage space cannot be spared. It may be thinned and the carcass discarded. Intensive fishing for the porbeagle dates back to the 1930s, when Norway and to a lesser extent Denmark began operating longline vessels in the northeastern Atlantic. The Norwegian annual catch rose from 279 tons in 1926 to 3,884 tons in 1933, and peaked at around 6,000 tons in 1947 with the resumption of fishing after World War II. Soon after the stock collapsed, Norwegian annual catches declined steadily to 1,200 to 1,900 tons from 1953 to 1960, 160 to 300 tons in the early 1970s, and 10 to 40 tons in the late 1980s to early 1990s. Similarly, Danish annual catches fell from 1,500 tons in the early 1950s to under 100 tons in the 1990s. France and Spain began to target porbeagles in the northeastern Atlantic in the 1970s. French fishers operate mainly in the Celtic Sea and the Bay of Biscay and saw a decline from an annual catch over 1,000 tons in 1979 to 300 to 400 tons in the late 1990s. Catches by Spanish fishers were highly valuable, ranging from negligible to over 4,000 tons per year, which may reflect shifts of fishing effort into historically less exploited waters. Since 2011, all fishing for the porbeagle has been illegal in waters off the European Union, and EU-registered vessels are also prohibited from fishing for the species in international waters. In 2012, similar restriction came into effect in Norway. The porbeagles had become scarce in the northeastern Atlantic in the 1960s as the Norwegian fishing fleet moved west to the waters off New England and Newfoundland. A few years later, they were joined by long-line vessels from the Faroe Islands. Norwegian annual catches rose from 1,900 tons in 1961 to over 9,000 tons in 1965. The catch was largely exported to Italy, where porbeagle is an extremely popular food fish. Again, the stock collapsed, this time only 6 years. By 1970, Norwegian catches had fallen under 1,000 tons per year, and Faroe's catches observed a similar trend. With the population decimated, most fishers moved on or switched to other species. Porbeagle numbers gradually recovered with the ensuing 25 years to about 30% of pre-exploitation levels. In 1995, Canada established an exclusive economic zone and became the primary fisher of porbeagles in the region. Between 1994 and 1998, Canadian fishing vessels landed 1,000 to 2,000 tons per year, which depleted the population to 11 to 17% of pre-exploitation levels by 2000. Strict regulations and greatly reduced fishing quotas introduced in 2000 have since begun to reverse the stock decline. The recovery of the stock is projected to take decades due to the low productivity of the species. Some evidence shows that incidental artificial selection caused by heavy fishing has led to a compensatory growth response, faster growth, and earlier maturation. In the southern hemisphere, commercial fishing for the porbeagle is mostly undocumented. Substantial numbers are caught incidentally by pelagic longline fisheries, targeting more valuable species such as southern bluefin tuna, swordfish, and patagoon toothfish, including vessels operated by Japan, Uruguay, Argentina, South Africa, and New Zealand. Porbeagle catches by the Uruguayan tuna pelagic longline fishery peaked in 1984 with 150 tons landed. Records of catch per unit effort for this fishery have shown a 90% decline in porbeagle landings from 1988 to 1998, though whether this reflects a real population decline or changing fishing habits is uncertain. New Zealand has reported annual catches of 150 to 300 tons, mostly of immature individuals from 1998 to 2003. The rapid collapse of porbeagle stocks on both sides of the North Atlantic is often cited as archetypical of boom and bust pattern of most shark fisheries. Factors including a small litter size, long maturation time, and the capture of multiple age classes all contribute to the shark's susceptibility to overfishing. The International Union for Conservation of Nature has assessed the porbeagle as globally vulnerable, endangered in the western North Atlantic, including the Baltic, and critically endangered in the eastern North Atlantic and Mediterranean Sea. The porbeagle is listed in Annex 1, Highly Migratory Species of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, and on Annex 1 of the Conservation of Migratory Species. Migratory Shark Memorandum of Understanding. This species benefits from bans on shark fishing instituted by several nations and supranational entities, including Canada, the United States, Brazil, Australia, the European Union, and the International Commission for Conservation of Atlantic Tunas. Although the Animals Committee of the UN Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna in Florida recommended additional conservation actions for the porbeagle, cities rejected proposals to list the species in 2008 and again in 2010. In March 2013, the porbeagle was listed on Appendix 2 of CITES, allowing for increased regulation and international trade of this species. In March 2015, the National Marine Fisheries Service responded to a court order to compile information as to whether the shark will be listed as threatened or endangered under the Endangered Species Act. The only regulation of porbeagle catches in the southern hemisphere is New Zealand's total allowable catch of 249 tons per year, instituted in 2004. In June 2008, the New Zealand Department of Conservation classified the porbeagle as not threatened with the qualifier threatened overseas under the New Zealand Threat Classification System. In the eastern North Atlantic, porbeagle fishing has been illegal in waters of the European Union since 2011. From 1985 until the EU banned the Faroe Islands and Norway, which are not members of the EU, were allowed annual quotas of 200 tons and 125 tons, respectively, from the European Community waters. Although these quotas were lower than the original set in 1982, they were still consistently higher than the yearly total porbeagle catch in the region, thus had no practical effect. The species is included on the Red List of Norway and has been protected in their national waters since 2012. Any porbeagle caught in EU or Norwegian waters by accident must be released. In the Mediterranean Sea, The porbeagle is on the verge of extinction, with a population decline of over 99.99% since the mid-20th century. Its range has been contracted to the waters around the Italian peninsula, where a nursery area may exist. Only a few dozen specimens have been recorded in the past few decades from scientific surveys, swordfish, fishery, bycatch, and sport fishers. In 1995, it was included in Annex 3, species whose exploitation is regulated, of the Barcelona Convention Protocol on Protected Areas and Biodiversity in the Mediterranean, which has not been ratified. In 1997, it was listed on Appendix 3 of the Berne Convention. However, these listings have yet to result in the implementation of new management plans despite the recognized need for urgent action. The European Union prohibits EU vessels from fishing for, retaining, boarding, transshipping, or landing porbeagle sharks in all waters since January 2011. It is subject to a zero total allowable catch in EU waters by any vessel. In the western North Atlantic, porbeagle population has a more positive prospect than the eastern North Atlantic. Fishing in Canadian waters was originally regulated by the 1995 Fisheries Management Plan for Pelagic Sharks in Atlantic Canada, which established an annual quota of 1,500 tons, restricted in the time, place, and gear types allowed for commercial fishing, and set limits for bycatch and recreational fishing. In 2000 to 2001, Fisheries and Oceans Canada prepared a detailed population model and concluded that a quota of 250 tons would allow for population growth, resulting in a quota of 250 tons being adopted for the period of 2002 to 2007. The mating grounds of Newfoundland were also closed to shark fishing. In 2004, the Committee of the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada listed the porbeagle as endangered, largely on the basis of low population abundance, minus 25% of original numbers. Canada decided not to list the species under its Species at Risk Act, but further reduced the total fishing quota to 185 tons. In U.S. waters, the 1993 Fishery Management Plan for Sharks of the Atlantic Ocean sets an annual quota of 92 tons after processing for the porbeagle. In 2006, this species was listed as a species confirmed by the MFS, meaning that it merits conservation concern, but data are insufficient for inclusion on U.S. Endangered Species Act. And that, you guys, is the porbeagle shark. I hope you guys really enjoyed this. And like I said, like, subscribe, comment. We really want to hear from you guys. I really want to know how much you're enjoying my videos and if there's anything I can do to make them better for you. So please let me know. And if you know anybody who loves sharks as much as I do or as much as you do, send them my way. Let them enjoy learning about sharks, because I enjoy teaching you guys about these sharks. And also, you guys, I just want to take a moment to recognize the amazing work of Ozzy Osbourne and Hulk Hogan, who have recently died. It is a very sad loss for the all-star community to lose a great musician like Ozzy Osbourne and a great wrestler like Hulk Hogan. We just hope that nobody else is going to join this pathway of death and celebrities. And I just want to say thank you so much for enjoying my videos. And the next video is going to be on the Wobbegong shark. So I hope you guys like, subscribe, comment, and enjoy my videos. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you all soon.